Hello reader besties! I am long overdue for my April reading wrap-up. I'm filming this already halfway through May, so I realize that you guys have been so patient, so thank you very much for that. I thought we'd start off today's video with a little bit of an independent book haul. So I received both of these books straight from the authors, one of which I've already read. I had the pleasure of reading Hunt of Calypso by Erin Phillips, which is in this package here, and then one of you guys actually wrote a book and sent it to me to read, and I'm very excited. It's a cozy fantasy, so I thought we could open these up together and take a look at the beautiful spines, and then we can get into the rest of the video. Okay, we're going to start off with this beautiful package sent by Miss Erin Phillips. She's one of my favorite authors. She wrote one of my all-time favorite fantasy books called A Bond of Briars. She's a fantasy author, and I love her little tagline. It says, "Dark stories that shine the light." And I think that is so perfect for her and her brand. She's also included a little character sticker sheet for her newest book. And then on the back, we have some fun things too. We've got the Hunt of Calypso bookmark. This goes directly with our book. Again, some of her previous works in the back. And this is really cool too. This is a glossary of some of the terms that are used in the story, different types of flowers and gemstones that are found within the story, and kind of their meaning and symbolism as well. That is a very fitting extra little detail to include when sending the hardcovers out to your customers, your readers. And of course, it's so perfect to include a little wax seal with some keys, since this series is about grimoires and keys. And it's just so fun opening up these fun packages from authors, because they really go the extra step to package everything so beautifully. I love this sticker already. Pretty things inside. Definitely going to use this in my junk journal. And here she is. She is stunning. Erin specifically designed this spine, which you will see me draw in my journal a little bit later, but she made this so that all of the series would look good next to each other on the shelf, like some vintage books. How satisfying is this? Everything lines up perfectly. I love the Roman numerals as well, very fitting for the story. And I just think the covers are stunning. And of course, she signed it. This is another cool thing I loved about this series. The series is based off of the Count of Monte Cristo, but it is kind of like gender swapped and, you know, a new story through a different perspective. But one thing that is true of the original Count of Monte Cristo is all of the chapters have chapter titles. So Erin has done the same thing to capture that in her series, which is so fun. And I really like this. I feel like we should normalize this again and bring this back to more books, because every title of the chapter, it makes me like guess ahead at what's about to happen. And it gets me excited for the next chapter I'm about to read. And this story specifically is very pirate coded, so I love the fonts that she chose for her chapter headers as well. I just think they look fantastic. She did such a good job. I'm really excited to show this and put this on my shelf. Now, I have already read this one, so she is just a shelf trophy at this point, but it is one of my most prized books because I loved the story. This next package is from Grace Soto. Hi Grace, I know you watch my videos, so I'm really excited about this because I feel like I'm connecting to you guys in a way. But like I said, Grace is a subscriber to this channel, and she reached out and asked if she could send me her book. I believe it's like a cozy fantasy. So we'll see how this goes. I feel like cozy reads are a little bit hit and miss for me, but I did read the first chapter and it has me intrigued, so I'm excited to continue. But let's see what she put together for us. Beautiful ribbon. We have some character art. I don't know who these people are just yet. That's a fun touch. I also really appreciate that in her illustrations, she doesn't use any AI, which is important to me. We've also got another wax seal, just such a fun touch. Very sweet. Of course, little thank you. Oh, I love this. Thank you, Grace. This wrapping paper is stunning, and I love how it's like double, you know, two-sided. All right, so this is Inheritance in Ink by Grace Soto. I'll read you the blurb too. It says, "The biggest mysteries are those of the heart." As a rhetoric and debate professor at the kingdom's best and only university, Nelius has never met a problem he can't solve with logic and reason, until the day he's accused of stealing a priceless artifact. Banned from campus and desperate to reclaim his honor and save his career before his debts come due, he'll do anything to prove his innocence, even if it means working with an unreliable Scrolls and Chronicles professor. Seraphine has one last chance to prove she's capable of handling the grueling schedule of a professor. If she can impress the headmaster with her historical research, maybe she'll finally shake her unfair reputation for being unambitious and unreliable. But when the most crucial document of her studies is suddenly stolen, she will have to forge new alliances and face old foes. When the investigation uncovers a conspiracy buried in the city's dark history, Nelius and Seraphine are thrust into a web of lies that will force them to rethink everything they once believed about those they trust and about each other, proving that the biggest mysteries are those of the heart. So cute. So it's a really short, cozy little mystery with, I think, some romance in it. And we've got a little signed copy here, which is so sweet. And again, I'm really excited to read this. I'm also excited there's illustrations inside. That's so cool. I'm such a font nerd. Like, just pairing the right font with your story tells the reader so much. I love this. You don't get books like this anymore with illustrations. Why do illustrated books have to be for kids? Like, can't we normalize them for adults too? So fun. I can already picture myself making a journal spread with some of these illustrations. So I love it. So cool. Okay, I'm excited to read this. I will report back soon and let you know my thoughts on Inheritance of Ink by Grace Soto. All right, so in April, I read 6 amazing books. I had such an incredible time. I had a couple 5-star reads. I had some that were just so-so, but overall, had a great time reading. I went to my first author event for The Fox Wife by Yangzi Chu. This was my city's one city, one book pick. So we did like a citywide book club, and the author herself came to our city to kind of give a talk around her book, which was so much fun. I went with some of my girlfriends and we just had a great time. So that was my first author event of the year. So I can check off one of my 2026 reading goals. Of the 6 books I read, Ninth House was a reread. This is one that has been on my shelf for a couple years, and I reread it because the 3rd book in the series is coming, I think in October. I'm very excited to read it. So I wanted to catch up and reread this very beloved series. For the Magical Readathon Spring Equinox, one of my prompts was to read a book with a day of the week in the title. So I read Sundays at Tiffany's, and I just borrowed the audiobook from the library. But these 4 books have made their way to my TBR. This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead is one that was sitting on my shelf for about a year. I really loved this thriller. I gave it a 4.5 stars, so we're going to color this in with my 5-star marker. Because like Goodreads, I don't have markers for every 0.5 stars. I added these 3 books to my TBR and read all 3 of them in April. View of Golden and The Hunt of Calypso are 5-star reads for me, and The Fox Wife was a 3-star read for me. I filled in all my data on my pages here. I am 10 books behind according to Goodreads this year, so that was interesting. I have definitely hit 100 easily the last couple years, but I guess I've just been a slower reader this year. In April, I added 2 books and then I read 2 books from my TBR, so it canceled out to 0 and I'm still at 129 for my TBR count. It's also interesting because this is my lowest audiobook month. I had a big gap between finishing Ninth House and finishing Theo of Golden. I loved Theo of Golden so much, but it's one of those books that I really had to savor, and therefore it took me a really long time to get through. My arc for April was The Hunt of Calypso. I'm going to mark that off in my long-awaited list. Okay, so since I read The Hunt of Calypso with my eyeballs, I get to color in a new spine on my bookshelf. And I got to do this last year with the first book in the series, which was Betrayal of Eden, and I colored in the spine here. So this one was actually one of the easier spines to illustrate because it's just brown, and then I used a gold and white jelly roll pen to create some details. So I'm going to do the same details on my illustration for this year. Now I'm using the Crayola Super Tips for my regular markers, and the only bummer about these kind of water-based markers is you do get some streaks. So with the darker color, I like to go over it a couple times so it looks more solid. But what I've found is that with these jelly roll pens, in order to really get a good coverage, the surface needs to be completely dry for what you're working on. And I'm not a very patient person, so this is the hardest part for me, is just waiting for the marker to fully dry before I can put a design on. Now, the first book in a series that I read this month was Ninth House, which I had already previously read because it was a reread. So I'm actually going to erase my previously drawn in black square. I'm going to fill that in with my April marker. And then I read Hunt of Calypso, which is from the Grimoire and Key trilogy. Whoa, that was a messy square there. I was not trying to color outside the lines that time, but it's okay. We can fix it with some whiteout. And then all my other books were standalones. In Book Besties, we read Theo of Golden, and in Book Babes, we read People of the Book. I ended up DNFing this book around 60%. I just didn't really connect with the main character. She kind of felt a little phony to me, but the story jumps back and forth between like present and a lot of these historical times that are within this book that our main character is researching. And the historical elements were really cool. But then as soon as it popped back into like modern time with our main character, Hannah, I just wasn't enjoying it. So I was trying to finish this book in time for book club and then ended up not finishing in time and not wanting to pick it up again. So we just called it done. Now to get into some reading challenges. I completed my spring equinox at the Orillium Academy. And then I've got a couple new books for my One Ring challenge. Starting with The Foxwife, this was a historical fantasy taking place in 1908 Manchuria. Then we have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is a dark academia story about a girl who can see ghosts. And then we have Sundays at Tiffany's by James Patterson. This is a really sweet story about a girl and her imaginary friend. So we're going to put that in magical realism. And then finally, we have The Hunt of Calypso. This one is a tricky book to categorize because it's a series, and the first series was definitely like dark academia vibes. And I would say the magic system in this book also is dark academia. However, this book is very pirate coded, which feels more like historical fantasy because of like pirates and things. But overall, I think that it makes most sense to put in dark academia. So my April prompt was to find a winter cloak and choose a book with a W in the author's name. And the only book on my shelf that had a W was Ashley Winstead, so I went with This Book Will Bury Me, and I loved it. It was wonderful. I've read 2 books by her now, and I gave both of them 5 stars, which I think is really tricky for me with a thriller, but she knows how to write them, I guess, or she knows how to connect with me at least. All right, kicking off my April book reviews, we're going to start with my favorite April readathon, which is Spring Equinox at the Orillium Academy. I've printed off this year's syllabus with the different prompts for my classes and also the books that I read for each of those classes. For example, in alchemy, the prompt was to reread a book. And the book I chose for that prompt was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. So I printed out just some different pictures that fit the vibe of Ninth House, which takes place at Yale University in kind of the secret societies. And we're going to make a collage background, set up a place for me to write in my review, and then also catalog what I read at the Orillium Academy. As I said, Ninth House is such a beloved story. It was my first book by Leigh Bardugo, and I devoured it in 2 days the first time I read it. This time I decided to go with the audiobook version, and it was just as good as I remembered it. This series starts off by introducing us to Galaxy Stern, who we know as Alex. She wakes up in a hospital after surviving a multiple homicide situation, and is given the opportunity to attend Yale University. This is very surprising because she is a high school dropout who has made some questionable choices in the last couple years and never would have thought she would be attending a university like this. But she has a special ability that Yale is very interested in. So she goes and joins the Ninth House. Since arriving at Yale, she has been under the tutelage of Daniel Arlington, but he's recently gone missing, and now there is a murder on campus that Alex is. Since arriving at Yale, she has been under the tutelage of Daniel Arlington, but he's recently gone missing, and now there is a murder on campus that Alex is. Since arriving at Yale, she has been under the tutelage of Daniel Arlington, who is kind of her guide into this new magical world. But he's gone missing, and now there is a murder that's happened on campus, and Alex is kind of tasked with assisting in solving this crime. And in order to do that, she has to rely on an unlikely character to help her out. This unlikely character also brings with him this unsolved murder from the past, which simultaneously is kind of being worked out at the same time as the present murders. In addition to all of this mystery, you've also got immense world building, just getting deep with these secret societies, kind of understanding the college life and how magic and history kind of get woven into these different houses. You get Alex's whole backstory and motivation for why she's there. And you also have the deeper mystery of what happened to her tutor and what can be done about this. It is such a page turner, and if you have yet to experience Ninth House, please pick it up soon because I highly, highly recommend it. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is Theo of Golden. I read this for my Spells and Incantations class. The prompt for this class was to practice in-fashion spells and incantations by currently reading a bestseller. And Theo of Golden is definitely hitting the charts and is possibly one of the best books I have ever read. So I'm very excited to make a spread for Theo of Golden. Theo of Golden follows our main character, Theo, who is an older gentleman who stumbles across a small fictional town called Golden in Georgia. He walks into a cafe one day and sees a bunch of pencil drawings of portraits all over the walls. He asks the cafe owner about them, and he's told that there's a local artist who draws portraits of people in town. So Theo decides to make it his mission to slowly purchase some of these portraits and find their owners and gift them a photo of themselves. This story is packed full of just heart-wrenching moments and really helps you understand who you are and your role overall in society and how you can make an impact on someone's life. It's a truly beautiful story. So obviously I had to include some pencil portraits in my spread in honor of Theo's whole quest. Theo has to be added to one of my favorite characters in all of literature. He's one of those guardian angel, wizard type characters that come into your life and completely turn it on axis. He brings a level of wisdom to the town of Golden that I crave in my own real life, and I wish that I could know Theo personally and in my reality. The story is structured sort of like a short story collection interwoven into a bigger picture. It's very cozy. Theo meets with these different townspeople and basically listens to their stories. And every single story you hear just connects you to these humans in such a powerful, profound way. I was especially moved by Ellen's story. She is a character who is unhoused, and Theo just treats her with so much compassion and love and joy. And I was completely inspired by that, and I loved her story so much. For my class in artificery, the prompt was to roll a d6 die, and whatever number you land on, read that consecutive book in the series. So I rolled a 2, therefore I read the second book in a series, and I chose The Hunt of Calypso by Erin Phillips. This is part of the Grimoire and Key series, so it's sort of a dark academia aesthetic. So I'm going to use this as our main character, Eden. I'm going to use these keys because those are also very prominent pieces of the puzzle in the story, and some old books to represent some magical grimoires. We've also got a dragon appearance, and this second book is very pirate themed. So I pulled out my pirate tapes that I used in my last reading journal. Lots of browns, scripty fonts. This one here is definitely the eye catcher. This is a foiled Ocean Wave PET tape, which is just stunning. I can't believe I'm almost out of this. I might need to reorder that. And then I have this little flip book of different maps and things. So we're going to put all that together in a beautiful spread. So, as I mentioned before, this series is loosely based on The Count of Monte Cristo, which is this epic revenge adventure story that I have very fond memories of. In the new spin on the story, we've got our main character who has been significantly betrayed by her loved ones and is thrust into a situation where she basically changes her whole identity. We are now in the second book of the series, and this one is very pirate coded. We follow Captain Calypso, known as Callie, who is searching the hidden sea for her inheritance left by her grandmother, the infamous Captain Calypso. If she was able to do this alone, she would, but she has to have a crew aboard her ship. So she pulls together this underdog team of characters who kind of fill in all of the weak spots of her character in different ways and give you that found family that you really hope for in every adventure story. We are joined by one of the characters in the first book, Hunter, who is trying to get back to his city and pay off debts that he's owed so he can be a free man. And things just keep getting in the way. He left the city on a ship with a very ruthless captain and is now trying to basically escape the burden of that situation. So he's able to join Callie's crew and they're able to align their different missions together for a common goal at the end of everything. Some things I loved about this story were obviously the found family. I love a story with best friends at the forefront. There is a little bit of romance. There's some magical world building inside. And there's a theme of, can you do good things for the wrong reason? And can you do bad things for the right reason? So it's a morality war built into this plot as well, which I always find so interesting. And because it's an adventure story, it is very fast paced, and every chapter you're kind of quickly moving into a new scene, a new conflict that the characters are facing. And the way that Erin Phillips kind of put together this team and band of people is they all have a unique talent that helps them through these situations, which is brilliant. For my restoration class, I read The Foxwife. The prompt was to ask for 5-star titles and pick one. Instead of asking my friends or people online, I actually took a recommendation from my own city. Every year, our city pulls out a bunch of possibilities and does like a one city, one book kind of experience in which they vet a bunch of different books and choose one for the whole city to read, kind of like a big book club. And then they invite the author to come and speak on behalf of their book. So this is Yangzi Chu. She was so sweet. I went with some of my girlfriends and we got to listen to her speak about her book, and it was just a joy to learn about the process of writing it, and I'm interested in reading more of her books. But the book that was chosen for our book club was called The Foxwife, so I took a portion of the cover and printed that out as sort of the backdrop for my spread. I wanted the red to really pop on this page, so I'm going to complement the photos with just a blue simple washi tape to kind of pull in the rest of the color on the book cover. The Foxwife takes place in 1908 in Manchuria. And when the author was giving her speech to our city, she talked about how she was inspired by the folklore of foxes, which are magical beings who can transform into really beautiful people and then back into the animal fox. So one of the characters in this story is such a fox. And then we're also following a character named Bao, who is a detective who has the supernatural ability to tell if someone is lying, which I feel like is a very handy gift if you're in that profession. He is investigating a series of deaths that he suspects are the work of foxes. Meanwhile, we are following a separate storyline of Snow, who is such a fox, and she is out on kind of a revenge hunt to find the person who killed her child. And her story and Bao's story eventually intersect, and they're able to help each other solve the mysteries that are unfolding in these stories. I opted for the audiobook version because it was available through the library, and was pleasantly surprised that the author herself narrates her own audiobook. I just love when that happens. I don't think you need to be an experienced audiobook narrator. I think you just need to have a passion for the story. So I think she did a fantastic job. The last book I read was James Patterson's Sundays at Tiffany's. This was for my inscription class, and the prompt was to read a book that has a day of the week in the title. So Sunday is in the title, and it was a very short audiobook, so that's why I chose that one. And then I also had to read a book for my adventure in Aldea, and the prompt for that was to choose an author that had a W in their name. So I chose This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. So these two books I'm going to do a combo spread for. As a little girl, Jane's best friend was her guardian angel, Michael. Now as an adult, she still holds fond memories of that friend, but chalks it up to an imagination. Then she sees Michael in the flesh again as an adult. And even he is not sure why she can see him because the kids usually forget about him when they grow up. The story continues to unfold, and we're left understanding that the right people come into your life for a season. I thought the book was okay. It was really short, so it didn't really have a lot of depth to it. But I was kind of given the ick by the relationship with the guardian angel and the child. Sure, she's grown up now, but like, still, if you knew her that young, I feel like it's creepy. But that's just me. I did really enjoy This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. This is a thriller, and our main character is also named Jane, but she is grieving the loss of her father, and work doesn't feel right, school doesn't feel right. She's kind of just lost herself, and she finds comfort in this group of people online who are amateur sleuths that solve crimes. So she starts digging into different web servers and looking up case files to try to solve a mystery. That's the end of my book reviews. I hope you guys had a great time today, and thank you for always showing up and encouraging me. Hope you have an amazing reading month.